It's not the government, the church, or even our schools. The home is the actual foundation of all societies, and it is steadily deteriorating. Do you realize how valuable your home is? Are you willing to do the homework required to be an influencer? A home influencer. Welcome to Homework with Kim. I'm Kimona Ferguson, and together we take a candid look at our homes and the work we need to do within its four walls and in our families in order to fulfill our God-given assignments. Just look around, you see it. We have some homework to do, so let's get started. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Homework with Kim. Thank you so much for joining me. And I know I have been MIA for a little while, but just a reminder that here we take a candid look at our homes and the work we need to do within its four walls and in our families to ensure that at the end of a long, hard day, when our heads hit the pillow, we can truly declare home sweet home. I'm your host, Kim, and oh, how I missed talking to you. Did you miss me? Okay. I believe that you really did, even if you said no. Now, you may have been wondering, if I was sent to the principal's office, if I was on detention, or perhaps, I could have gotten suspended or even worse, expelled. No, I don't give trouble like that. Nothing like that. Just had to kind of take a little break, but I'm back and I trust you have been doing your homework regardless, and that you've also been sharing your notes with each other, because this is one of the spaces where there is no punishment for sharing our answers with each other. We don't have to hide and show anybody our book. There is no shame in that. And not only is it permitted here on the Homework with Kim podcast, because we're all about doing the homework and getting a big fat sticky. If you're Jamaican, you know what a sticky is for the Americans or the Canadians or the English. We say a check mark, which implies that you're getting it correct as you go. So not only sharing our notes permitted, it is encouraged here on Homework with Kim, because it's all about iron sharpening iron. We want everybody to get a good grade, hypothetically, of course. Today, I want us to talk a bit about the fact that the world that we live in has gone mad. You heard me, the world has gone mad. Now, of course, if you ask your politician and your woke friends or acquaintances, those forward-thinking folks, they may say, no, our world is advancing. The future is finally looking promising. I mean, after all, we've opened the floor for many discussions to be had and changes to be made. People seem far more open-minded today, certainly in comparison to the closed-mindedness that existed centuries ago. They'd say, yep, I think we're on the right track. There's no place at the table for everyone. I mean, we all just need to be tolerant and accept each other's views. Blah, blah, blah. The news media coverage of major stories may seemingly carry some quote-unquote normal reports about business, politics, sports, entertainment. I mean, we hear about natural disasters. Everything looks pretty normal. But friends, as far as I'm concerned, the majority of what we're hearing happening in our world and in our island, Jamaica, leads me to a conclusion that the world has in fact gone mad. Mad in both the sense of anger and in the sense of being mentally disturbed. What do I mean? Let's narrow it down for a bit. Quite possibly to the surprise of some, I am not one of those who go out of my way to watch, let's say, the primetime news, which we have here in Jamaica at about 7 p.m. I just don't. No, I'm not oblivious to the major issues that are happening around me, but I choose, in a way, to preserve my peace on a daily basis, and sometimes that means not overwhelming my mind and home with many of these horrid reports of bloodshed and all else that is happening, corruption, you name it. I do access news reports, however, but usually at a time designated by me when I decide, usually away from my child, where I am able to decipher and navigate what I will expose her to. Just a side note. Now back to this mad world and this mad Jamaica. When I say we've gone mad as a world and society, I mean mad in the sense of anger, as I said before. Since my last check, Jamaica, land we love, has not been officially declared a war zone. Yet the number of people slain in conflicts between families, gangs, individuals, domestically in our country is disturbing. And that's putting it mildly. Anger is usually a component of war. And currently there is open warfare in many of our communities in Jamaica. And within some communities, there are these internal conflicts that involve armed forces, and I don't mean police forces. And these armed forces, many of them young men, are influential enough and continue to wreak havoc. Then there are those belligerent individuals roaming the streets. I call them madmen in clean clothes. Many of them are on our roads operating public passenger vehicles. They make a lot of threats and cause problems for other law-abiding citizens. Jamaica and the world at large have gone mad. I mean, targeting innocent bystanders at locations far from battle zones demonstrate a madness that combines rage with a sense of mental illness as far as I'm concerned. As our society continues to allow tiny groups of young men and sometimes women to exert power and control over others well beyond their actual number, there's more of us than there are of them. People stoop to taking lives for retaliation, money, or simply just because. Let's not, of course, lose sight of the chaos caused by the escalating racial tensions stoked by race baiters, and I'm kind of leaving our shores for a bit, not saying that it doesn't plague us here, but we see it more so over on the other side. Friends, tell me if you do not see that racial craziness has reached a point where there are individuals who exhibit extremely uncivil behavior, and they are the ones protesting that their emotional safe spaces are breached simply if others express opinions they do not agree with. Mad. Then we have the adults who are meant to be in control. They are unable to demand that these children who just happen to be in adult bodies, they can't even demand that these people grow up simply because they are incapable of handling an open argument. Nobody wants to offend anyone. So we find administrators and teachers, for example, getting fired simply because they express a different view. And I am aware that Black Lives Matter, but there is no simpler way for me to put this. If all lives do not matter, then no lives matter, regardless of how much melanin is in your skin. And I have a whole lot in my skin. I hope you're still with me after hearing that. So remember, we're looking at how mad this world has gone. There are also these absurd rulings that demand that nearly everyone, even children, recognize marriage between persons who are the same sex. A woman can be a husband, and a man can be a wife. Any two women may get married. No way. Call it by another name, but it's not marriage. Transgender rights are being consistently and universally pushed ahead of the rights of everyone else. It seems like the LGBTQ plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 community has more rights than you and I. Their rights are consistently being pushed ahead of everyone else's. And as you can tell, I could go on in this manner for a while, but I believe it is obvious by now that our world and society have gone mad. We must heed the admonition in Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Friends, that is the world we now live in. The current state of affairs is depressing, and any optimism for the near future is made even more depressing by the fact that our political leaders, many of whom frequently exhibit signs themselves of mental insanity or instability, they are the ones posing as the beacons of stability. The insanity of believing that these leaders can be the ones to find solutions to our problems is probably best described as, you guessed it, mad. It's not going to happen. I've heard it said, and I've said it myself, that I do not envy the children and the young people that have to grow up in this time we're in. And then it dawns on me, oh, but you are raising a child who will have to grow up in it. So friends, as much as I'd love to close my eyes, stop up my ears, and pretend I can see, pretend I cannot hear, I'm not afforded the privilege to do so, as I have a child to train up. And I mean, how can I give her the instruction and guidance? How can I keep her safe if I don't first understand myself how to navigate and make sense out of much of this nonsense? Some may say, oh, come on, she's just 5. She's still so young. No need to worry about those things so early. Oh, but I know better. You see, the madness is impartial. In fact, it is unrelenting, and it is the vulnerable, the young, the children who are most at risk in becoming a casualty in all this madness. You see, the people with evil motives who go after our children, they understand how it works. The TV programming, for example, is to get control or, as the name suggests, program their minds. Sure, it's a cartoon. I mean, it's not mind control. It's just cartoon guns, cartoon crude jokes and sarcasm. It's real unfortunate that as parents we are still so naive. They understand how it works, yet we still do not. So the aim is to program your child, all while they're under your roof, they're under your care, they're under what is supposed to be your supervision. Parents, wise up. We are in a mad world. So they get introduced and overexposed to this madness very early, and this leads to challenges of addiction, racial tension, with what they call hookup culture. In Jamaica, we say everybody I forget a man as young as you are. Consumerism, you can see something and not need to get it. I mean, it's the latest gadget, it's the latest this. All while parents sit and scratch their heads wondering, what do I do? What do I do to help my child who is struggling? Where does this issue of gender identity and sexual orientation, how come they have these questions? I mean, in my day, we never known. All we know was man and woman. Where them have all these questions and struggling coming from? Friends, we must help to steer our children's entertainment choices, because you see now we have gay neighbors, gay teachers, gay influencers, transgenders, and all of them want access to our children. We have young children being exposed to pornography, and the list goes on. It's a mad world. Therefore, we must be empowered as parents to initiate conversations with our children about everything they will face in this mad culture. If your child is anything like mine, they have tons of questions. And quite possibly they aren't revealing all the questions that have even come to their minds. But let's consider this. If they don't ask you, I bet they will ask someone else if you ignore their inquiries. Or they'll just research it online. And friends, that's a risk you simply cannot take. Your children can now learn about sex through their peers, through their teachers, and dare I say, through even pornographers on some of these social media applications. Everywhere we turn in our culture, on television, in the movies, and now through sexual education in schools, our children are being told to embrace moral relativism and accept the abnormal and the unbiblical as simply just a matter of personal choice. And it's not just about sex either. This mad world is ready and willing to teach our children almost anything. To encourage our children to become critical thinkers. Parents, we must take more initiative than before if we are to do this. Many children today, 2023, have the latest gadgets, know how to operate maybe the newest phone that you and I couldn't even figure out how to turn on. They can turn it on and get it going. And I pride myself in being, a little technologically savvy. But I'm telling you, these youngins are in a class all by themselves. But we're finding that many of them are unable to distinguish between thinking and feeling. You ask a question and you realize that it's a matter of this is how I feel, therefore this is how I think. This is how I feel about a matter, therefore this is what I think about a matter. Friends, we must teach them to distinguish between thinking and feeling. The truth is, if they can't master ideas, ideas will master us and it will master them. If we sit and passively absorb all this information around us, someone else is thinking for us. Worldviews, much like a cold, is caught rather than taught. They just catch on. They just catch the culture. They just catch the ways of the society around them. They end up with a worldview. But if they don't take their time to reflect on what do I believe? Why do I believe it? Does this even make sense? They may not discover that it is an improper worldview. So I encourage you, friends, to not sit back and watch as your children fall prey to these harmful ideologies and vain ideals. Our children and we ourselves are more likely to become lights of hope in this mad world if we aim to comprehend what is happening in our culture from the perspective of Scripture. So I'm just going to give us 3 tips for how we navigate this mad world, and especially how we protect our children at all costs as we navigate this mad world. Number 1, teach your children to understand moral relativism versus godly conduct. And many of us have heard moral relativism, but some of us do not know what that is. We've heard the term floating around. But what it is simply the standard of the day. It says that what's right or wrong for you is just simply up to you. It's not up to me to tell you what's wrong or right. And of course, it's definitely not up to God to tell you and us what's wrong or right. And according to this prevailing theory, something can only be true or untrue. It can only be right or wrong in relation to what that person and that community decides. In other words, a group of people come together and they say, we see no problem with this, therefore there is no problem with this. We do not think it is wrong, therefore it is not wrong. So they are the ones deciding, setting the moral standard, and everybody should accept it as being right because they think it is right. Now, what do you think the problem with moral relativism is? Every society that rejects the idea of a moral standard descends into depravity and ultimately disintegrates. In other words, if you say simply because I don't think it is wrong, it's automatically no longer wrong, then we have a serious problem. A man can say, I don't think it is wrong for an adult male to engage in an inappropriate relationship with a child. And they can come up with a group of people who can agree with that. What will eventually happen if society's standards depend and change based on groups of people or individuals deciding this is no longer wrong? I no longer see a problem with it. We will disintegrate, and the disintegration has started. So teach your children God's standard, male and female, He made them. The 10 Commandments, you name it. Introduce them to a standard outside of themselves, a godly standard, an absolute standard. Secondly, recognize the importance of having conversations with your children. Remember, we're teaching them how to navigate this mad world, and we're trying to protect them at all costs in this mad world. Therefore, we have to build bridges. We have to use conversation to build bridges of comprehension. We want to get them to understand. And the only way they can understand is if we talk to them about what is happening. Now, naturally, a conversation with my 5-year-old will differ from one that you may have with your teenager, but we both alike need to still build a communication channel within our family. The bridge that we construct through time and by being purposeful, having purposeful conversation, deciding what we're going to talk about, how we're going to talk about it. These are what our children need to understand and comprehend what they're hearing in this crazy environment within which they live. We're not preaching at them here, but it's a good time to ask some questions. We're building the bridge. So if they're watching a movie, you interject, you say, what do you think about that scene? Especially if you pick up that there's a lesson. And when I'm watching movies with my 5-year-old, of course, these movies are screened before she watches them. Even though the lessons are usually quite solid, I still like to make sure that she's interpreting. What do you think him saying that implies? How do you think how he answered his father? What do you think about how he responded? What do you think about how she tried to help that little boy and so forth? Ask some questions. I mean, I've been in traffic and Phoebe would see people cussing, and she's like, why are they behaving like that? That's not kind. And I'd say, yes, and some people just do not know how to behave kind, which is why when you go out, we'll meet people who respond in ways that are unkind, but you know that it is wrong and you try your best to respond in the way that you're supposed to. So just try to take the opportunities to use conversations to build bridges to help them understand what is happening around them. It's just pick up on certain conversational cues in order to get them to understand and differentiate between right and wrong, and to understand the culture that is happening around them. And of course, the goal as well is not to shame them with any negative reaction. Like, how could you dare think that we're staying away from that kind of thing? Being all shocked and clutching our pearls when our children say something or ask a question that we think is a little bit too this or a little bit too that. No, it's an opportunity for conversation. As long as it's not disrespectful, we need to kind of try to relax a bit and step off of the parental high horse and try to help them to understand and navigate the madness of this world. Let's show them a little empathy, because there's a lot that they have to contend with. We want to be reminded that communication fosters trust. We don't want to force anything, but we want them to get to a point where they are comfortable talking to us. They feel comfortable talking to us. This communication bridge has to be built. It takes time to build. Regardless of what they say, let's not get irate and act like we've never had those kinds of thoughts before. We want to build and foster trust. I know it would be simple to give up in despair, friends, at the chaos and the brokenness in our world, and just flee with our families to a place where the insanity doesn't exist. We have a fantastic chance to encourage the raising of world-changing, God-honoring individuals, even in the midst of this madness. And even as we work to create change makers for the world, we are conscious that neither adults nor children are perfect. So let's help our children to understand how to be unwavering in their beliefs while still modeling mercy for others. We want them to stand up for what they believe in, no matter if they're the only ones in the room saying it is wrong. We want them to be able to confidently stand while at the same time modeling mercy for others. You see, the aim is always to become like Jesus. He was gracious, he was kind, but he never called wrong right. He never called good evil and evil good. So teach your children in this mad world to cling onto the truth without shunning or shaming. We, friends, are alive for such a time as this. So let's do the homework necessary to raise children who are mad. You're wondering if you heard that right. In this case, MAD is the acronym MAD. Let's raise children who we are equipping to make a difference. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Homework with Kim, for lending me your ear for these few moments. I hope you feel empowered to go out there in this mad world. Another day, another evening, another morning, but feeling empowered and equipped to help our children navigate as we seek to enable them to make changes in this world. Until we next speak, don't forget to look around.
You see it. We have some homework to do, so let's get started.